ageism, advocacy, and activism. That's what we're going to talk about this afternoon. By the way, thank you all for coming out on Mother's Day. Are there any mothers here? No. Remember, if it wasn't for mothers, we wouldn't be here. So we're grateful. How many of you are members of JSA? How many of you are going to become members today? Everybody? Everybody must become a member. It's a requirement. Requirement, please. How many of you read the senior line? How many of you enjoy the senior line articles? Okay, we're coming out with the next publication in about by mid-June, and it's going to be even better, even better. Reminder of our motto, which we in JSA live by every day: seniors stronger together. What we're doing, we want to make the lives of older Canadians, older members of the British Columbia community, more independent, more self-reliant, and hopefully to stay in their homes longer with proper supports. So we need your support for this. Some of the things that we're doing in advocacy, you'll read in the President's column coming out, and that is we are advocating a national pharmacare program. It will, thank you. The details will be in the column. Simply, it would require the Canada Health Act being opened up and including pharmacare, which already includes physicians and hospitals. And simply that you know that the health care is responsibility of the provinces, but the federal government participates financially because it would healthcare would break the provinces. Two housekeeping announcements. On June the 10th, we'll be holding our first annual high tea. It will take place right here. Tickets are on sale now. Tickets are only $36, but what you get is we have at least a dozen door prizes included in the price of admission. One of the door prizes is a hotel night. We won't say where it is, including breakfast. Another one is $150 dinner for two. We won't tell you where it is until the event happens. And lots of other stuff. Great food, great entertainment, and a caricature artist, all for free. It's a fundraiser, and it's also a time to celebrate our President Emeritus, Serge Haber's 90th birthday. There are many issues affecting older adults. I'm not going to use the word seniors. I think older adults is a much nicer nomenclature. Maintaining independence, housing issues, income. I'm thinking of persons who are on fixed incomes, low fixed incomes, and may have to spend more than 30% of housing. That's the suggested maximum amount you should spend on housing, 30%. But I better not give a lecture, that's for another time. Protection from fraud, protection from income scams. Who speaks for older adults? In part, JSA does. And I mentioned part of we're advocating a national pharmacare program. We also support doing a broader look at poverty. What can we do to decrease the need for food banks, for example. And we made a presentation to the Commission on food banks recently. Anyway, there is a bigger and much needed national approach. So when it comes to older adults, who has Ottawa's ear? We don't have to look far. The Canadian Association of Retired Persons, or CARP, has a strong presence in Ottawa. CARP has made numerous presentations to our federal government, listing the challenges, thank you, facing older adults and proposing solutions. Now, there's a rule that I like to have. You can't complain without proposing a solution, and that's what CARP does. We're pleased to have Wanda Morris of CARP here today. As many of you know, Wanda is a frequent contributor to the Vancouver Sun. There will be a Q&A period after Wanda's presentation. And after, please stay here and enjoy the refreshments. Lots of goodies. Now, a little bit about Wanda. Wanda is a chartered accountant by profession and is vice president of CARP in Canada. And she lives, by the way, locally. CARP is a 300,000 member, non-for-profit, nonpartisan advocacy organization that fights for improved health care and financial security for Canadians as we age. Wanda has led recent CARP campaigns to improve protection for investors, provide increased supports for caregivers, better safeguard for residents in long-term care, and to improve protections for corporate pensioners. Wanda is a frequent media commentator and a contributor to Zoomer magazine. She also writes a weekly daily column, Grey Matters, for Postmedia, which appears in daily broadsheets including the Vancouver Sun, Calgary Herald, Edmonton Journal, Montreal Gazette, and Ottawa Citizen. Prior to joining CARP in February 2016, Wanda was a CEO for Dying with Dignity Canada, where she led a strategic campaign for legislative change leading up to the Supreme Court of Canada's decision in the groundbreaking Situation Carter v. Canada case for the right to die with dignity. Wanda has years of experience in both advocacy and policy development, plus the practical business expertise she gained as a CPA, including 7 years with PricewaterhouseCoopers in Vancouver and Melbourne, Australia. It gives me great pleasure to present Wanda Morris.
Can everyone hear me? Yes. And if I start to get excited and wave away from my mouth, just give me that signal with your hand or by your ear so that I'm so appreciative of you coming out today. I want to make sure you can hear what I have to say. So thank you for that kind introduction. There is a number of statistics that have been that have come out of the latest Statistics Canada's consensus, and one of them is that there are 1,000 Canadians turning 65 every day. You may also have heard that there are now more people 65 and over than under 15. And do you know what the fastest growing demographic group is? It's centenarians, Canadians 100 and better. So, for those of you in this room, if you are part of a male-female couple that is 65, you have a 50% chance that at least one of you will live to 90. A 25% chance that one of you will live to 95. And a 10% chance that one of you will tip into 3 digits. good news, right? There are 6 million Canadians right now who are 65 and over, so 1 out of 6 Canadians. And in 12 years, 1 out of 4 of us is going to be 65 and over. There are a lot of Canadians who are aging, and there's some things that we need to do about it. We are living longer, but are we living well? Retirees, older Canadians, face many healthcare challenges. We've got extended wait times for diagnostic procedures and medical procedures. Who here has a family physician, has their own physician? And that is great news, but I know that not all hands have gone up. Wait times in emergency rooms. Do you know that in Spain, they don't have wait times in emergency? If you're familiar with Henri Picard, the healthcare writer, he did a tour of hospitals around the world, and when he asked in Spain what their wait times were in emergency, they said, well, it's an emergency. Why would there be wait times? Skyrocketing healthcare costs, many of which are potentially being passed on. And is anyone familiar with the phrase Gomer? It's a really pejorative phrase that is sometimes used, get out of my emergency room, to by doctors to chronic older Canadians with comorbidities who they can't manage and don't want to see. So many healthcare challenges. And that's not all. We've got a lot of financial challenges too. Historically low interest rates, unprecedented longevity, defined benefit pension plans that are disappearing or that are underfunded, and some of the highest investment costs in the world compared with some of the least investor protections. And those are just for those of us who are financially well off. If you're somebody who struggles financially, you can also face a number of other issues. Trying to live on an OAS or GAS, an old age security or guaranteed income supplement, that maybe would work quite well if you're in Prince George or Prince Rupert, but it's going to be a really struggle if you're in Kerrisdale or Point Grey. Significant GIS clawbacks that really disincent people to go out and get other income. Increasing rentals, and certainly everyone here in Vancouver can relate to the high costs of housing, rental or fixed. And expenses for medical aids, things like hearing aids and walkers and scooters that aren't covered through our medical system. And of course, we could add the high cost of prescription drugs here as well. So we have a quantity of life. Many of us will live into our 90s and beyond. What about quality of life? There's a statistic called HALE, Health Adjusted Life Expectancy, which not only measures how long we'll live, but how well we'll live. And it gives us an adjusted lifespan. And our health adjusted quality of life, how many years less than our total life do you think it typically is? Do you think we live like all but the last year in good health, or is it 5 years or 10 or 20? It's 10. So the health adjusted quality of life calculation assumes that there will be about 10 years where we will live with significant comorbidities, whether they're problems with our mobility or our vision or our hearing or ongoing chronic illnesses. So is this inevitable? We have these financial challenges, these healthcare challenges. Is this just part of being an older Canadian? And is this something that we should accept with grace? Because, heck, there's a lot of people that haven't had the chance to live this long. And I would say that this is neither inevitable nor acceptable. And when we look into the reasons behind these challenges, these healthcare challenges, and these financial challenges, there's a root cause. And I'm going to digress a moment and talk about root causes and BC Hydro. So you're probably all familiar with BC Hydro, the local electricity utility, and working with electricity is not safe. There have been a number of deaths over the years at BC Hydro and also very significant electrical accidents. And so to their credit, they did some work on the issues of their accidents to look at what was going wrong. And they had their various accident reports that talked about things like this person wasn't properly trained, or there was too much of a wind when this person was working on a wire, or this was a person that had come to work with issues with, they weren't well that time. And what they discovered is that the reasons that were going into the accident reports, the winds, the training, the wellness, weren't the real reasons that people were having these terrible safety accidents. And when they drilled down, what they understood is that there was an underlying culture that didn't recognize the importance of safety, that didn't recognize that everything should come second and safety should come first. And I give you that example because when we look at the situation of older Canadians and the healthcare challenges and the financial challenges, I think there is an underlying issue here that needs to be addressed. And I think that issue is ageism. It's neither acceptable or inevitable, but it is widespread. Let's take a look. Ageism in the workplace. I have talked to so many people who told me they were let go in their 50s. They were either told, look, you're kind of at the top of the payroll chain. We've got people that can do your work for less. We're going to offer you a package. Or, gee, we've got other people that are supporting young families. You've had your run. It's time to go. Very devastating. But nothing compared to the difficulty they have faced as a person in their 50s or 60s trying to get a job. Seeing advertisements that talk about wanting digital natives, as if there is something inherently better about somebody who is younger. Even workplace posters that show as if the average workplace consists entirely of 30 and 40-year-olds. So if we can't get a fair shake in the workplace, that makes it harder for us to set up ourselves for successful financial retirement. And worse for women who may have taken time out to raise children or who disproportionately care for older family members or siblings. Ageism is, I will say, rampant in the healthcare system. Imagine if every child that needed healthcare had to wait as long as older adults have to typically wait for things like knee replacements or hip surgeries or something for their eyes if there's a glaucoma or some other operation, something that's even routine. And those are just if we get into the suggested wait times, many of which are routinely exceeded. It's like we accept that it's okay to allow older Canadians to be in pain for extended periods, where I'm sure that wouldn't be the case at Sick Kids Hospital. Is anybody here familiar with Elizabeth Wettlaufer, the nurse in Ontario who admitted to being guilty of killing, murdering seniors in long-term care facilities? Do you think it's possible that 8 different individuals, 10, 12, 14, could have been murdered at Sick Kids at Children's Hospital over a period of almost a decade with nobody being the wiser? Are we applying the same standards? Ageism at the doctor's office. We have a healthcare system that compensates doctors by and large on a per procedure basis. So what that means is that if you're a 30-year-old and you get an ear infection every once in a while, or maybe you're going to have a sporting accident to go in and see your doctor doctors well compensated. But as we get older, we don't tend to be just a lung or a liver or a leg. We are a complex collection of body parts, and those don't often fit neatly into one particular doctor's fee code. So what that means is that doctors often see older Canadians at a discount. They might even have a sign in their office. Has anyone seen a sign in their doctor's office that says just one issue for treatment? But how many of us just have one thing? As we get older, we have a collection of things that happen. And of course, the other area that is extremely discriminatory is in federal transfer payments, because those health transfer payments are transferred per capita, the same dollars per 30-year-old as per 60, 70, 80, and 90-year-olds. And that's not fair. That means provinces like BC, where lots of older Canadians come to retire, have a chronically underfunded healthcare system. Doctors also, if they are restricting their practice, who do you think gets fired? It's the older patients. They say, oh, I'm so sorry that I'm cutting down my hours and I'm not able to look after you anymore. Or they might move to an office that's up a set of stairs so that the patients then self-select and go elsewhere because those stairs aren't safe. How many of you have tried to cross a street and found that the walk light just isn't long enough to safely get across? You shouldn't have to take your life in your hands to walk in your neighborhood. And you know what? Many older Canadians restrict their walks not because they can't walk a certain distance, but because they can't walk that distance without stopping. So if we don't have washrooms out there, if we don't have public toilets, if we don't have benches, and if sidewalks aren't cleared, we are keeping people housebound, homebound, and keeping them socially isolated. And that is ageism too. And having just come home from a trip, I'm really aware of ageism at the airport. Standing in line to go through customs, standing in line to go through security. If you are an older individual, sometimes those lines are very hard. I have a bit of arthritis, and I don't like to stand in line after about 5 minutes. But sometimes those lines are 10, 20, 30 minutes or more, and you don't know how long they're going to be. So what happens then is we either self-select and we restrict and we travel less, or we go and choose holidays where we don't have to do that much walking or that much standing, and often at a higher price. So that's a cost as well. So ageism starts with disrespect and can lead to neglect and abuse. And I will say that it underpins the financial and health issues that so many older Canadians face. So I will take the thought of the wonderful introduction and say you can't talk about a problem without talking about a solution. So what can we do about this? Engagement matters. It's not enough to be concerned if the only thing that you do with your concern is internalizing. You need not only to get angry, but to get active. So let's talk about advocacy. At CARP, I like to tell our volunteers that advocacy, to be effective, is a three-legged stool. It's about connecting with media, and I would include social media in that. It's about connecting with politicians and political candidates, and it's about connecting with bureaucrats. So what do? How do we connect with the media? How can our voice make a difference? One of the most critical things that we can do is watch our language and watch the language of other people. So is somebody being referred to as a grandmotherly person? Are they being described as spry or feisty? If that adjective is not complimentary or doesn't fit with the 30-year-old, then why are we you're an 8-year-old. That's ageist. And we need to watch our own language, and we need to point out to our media and our social media when language that they are using is similarly inappropriate. And I'll share a story from my Dying with Dignity days when I was the CEO, and one of the big battles that we had was about language. Do we support the right to a dignified death, the right to choose, the right to assisted death, or were we advocating for assisted suicide? Because you can't say the words assisted suicide without saying suicide, and suicide is something that should give us grave concerns. And then one of the turning points in the fight to legislate assisted dying in Canada was when the media, by and large, stopped talking about assisted suicide and started talking about assisted dying. Words are powerful. Now, let's say someone has used some inappropriate words. Let's say they've talked about somebody who has remained active or who is still in the workplace, as if that's an unusual and atypical thing to do. We need to point out that that language is not appropriate. But there's a way to do this and a way to do this well. And I will suggest to you that the way not to do it is to write a 3-page letter in all caps on a typewriter. The interesting thing is, as much as it feels righteous to rage and to tell people how much they've offended us, the best way to get someone's attention is to whisper. The best way is to be respectful, to get under their defenses before they even realize that we are arguing with them. So we need to use, and I can tell you one of the skills that is so prevalent in our and in older generations that's often missing in younger ones is the ability to write and to critically think and to use appropriate grammar and punctuation. And so we need to use those skills and write carefully worded pieces to our members of parliament, to our MLAs, as volunteers in our newsletters, to our newspapers, and to call them out, but to call them out respectfully, and to call them out concisely. We may be retired and have a lot of time on our hands. We should use that time to winnow and whittle and capsulize our points. There's an interesting story, and I don't know if it's true or not, but about Jack Layton and Olivia Chow, his wife Jack Layton, the former leader of the NDP, and Olivia Chow, a member of parliament in Ottawa, in Toronto, and they used to compete to see who could get more mentions in the press. And you know who was better at it? Olivia was. She was much better at it. And her rule of thumb was 9 words or less. Get a soundbite that is 9 words or less. So your writing can be longer than 9 words, but make it around that 9-word soundbite. So language is critical. We start to monitor our own language and to respectfully suggest that when other people use language that inadvertently is racist, or pardon me, well, let's call out racism as well, but is ageist, let's call them at it. And I think it is equally applicable to jokes. Because when we joke about something, there is an element of truth in it. And so if we joke about not being all there, about not being capable, about not being worthy of dignity and respect, we open the door to being treated that way in real life. So watching our language and watching the language of others, we think, by and large, that we make, how many people here would say that they make decisions based on facts, logic, and critical thinking? Okay. And then we have, the rest of us, the reality is, and psychology has tested this, that we But what the research shows is that our decision making tends to come from our hearts. We are touched in our hearts, and that moves us. And then we are moved, we come up with the logical, critical explanations about why that is the right thing to do. And how do we touch people's hearts? It's through story. The way to touch people is through story. So in our pension campaign that we've been waging, we've got some horrific statistics out there. We've got 1.3 million corporate pensioners who stand to get a potential haircut. We have people who are losing their health and dental benefits, which is a significant cost for somebody on a fixed income. But those statistics pale in comparison to the stories of people who, like Robert Renier, said, I was such a devoted Sears employee. I go there on the weekends to stay out late at night to set up for special shows, never claimed for overtime. I was loyal to the company, and I expected that loyalty in return. People like the wife of a pensioner who said, my husband was so proud that he could provide for me, and that even after he was gone, he would know that I had this pension and this security, and now I ache for him as well as for me. And it's those stories that put a face on the tragedy. And often we think, well, if I have a really big number, that will be impressive. And 1.3 million corporate pensioners, or $300 million of underfunded pension liabilities. But the reality is it's one story at a time that would change our minds. So we need to tell our stories. And if there is an issue that we care about, then it's critical that we share the story behind the issue. Here's Paul Gain, one of the pensioners who was willing to talk about the issues with Sears. His quote, if a pensioner robbed a business, they'd face the full wrath of the law. But I think as interesting as that quote is, what was more compelling was his story about the decades of work that he put into Sears and the devastation, not only the financial devastation of losing part of his pension, but the emotional devastation that what he did, the loyalty that he thought he earned was spurned, and how the company sold off its assets and dividended the proceeds to a foreign shareholder, leaving the pensioners high and dry. When we want to be active, we want to advocate, size matters. And here, CARP is in a position to advocate. We have a strong base, particularly in Ontario, 300,000 members across the country, which includes our spousal members. And before some of the political parties started giving out free memberships, we used to say that CARP had more members than all the political parties put together. And I don't know if you can see this, but if Zoomers, this is something that our associated, our sister organization, Zoomer Media, put together, and if Zoomers, which are Canadians 45 plus, were a province, you can see Zoomer Nation there, it would be the biggest one in Canada. So size matters, and it matters because politicians want to speak to, they want to get their message out, they want to be heard. And so we were able to get Justin Trudeau to come and speak at our AGM. And recently when I was in Ottawa, he crashed a meeting I was at, which is like, oh, couldn't I have done my hair that day? But anyways, how incredible to have a meeting face-to-face with him. And recently we had Andrew Scheer come to our AGM. So our size helps us attract politicians. And one of the reasons that I have finagled a move out to BC is that we are not as big here as we should be. There are many seniors that retire here. There are a lot of issues that we need to address, and yet our membership is comparatively small. So we need to to grow our voice and speak out. The final piece, the bureaucrats, is creating policy. Because amazingly enough, we think that it's just a question of will. Why doesn't the government just do X? But often, the government doesn't know what X should be. And so putting together research and policies to help them make decisions that will move us forward, that will protect older Canadians financially and in healthcare is really critical. And that's part of the work that we do at CARP with our advocacy team, but also one of the reasons that we partner. And we partner with organizations like the Jewish Seniors Alliance, and I'd love to talk about partnering on pharmacare, because that's an issue that I think is near and dear to many CARP members. And we partner with other groups that have particular issues of importance to them, where they have the deep knowledge and understanding and have done the work of policy analysis, and we can help elevate those policy profiles and platforms. So I'm going to stop there. I'll take questions just in a moment, but I just want to tell you a little bit more about who CARP is. So we are the largest seniors advocacy organization across the country, 300,000 members, and we are partnered with Zoomer Media Limited. My boss, a man by the name of Moses Neimer, had, I think, the really incredibly creative idea to say there's 85,000 not-for-profits in Canada, 85,000, and every one of them is desperate for a column inch or two. So what if we partnered a not-for-profit with a media company and gave that not-for-profit access to a magazine, a radio station, television stations, a digital production department? And so that is the CARP and Zoomer Media Alliance. It also means that we can offer some really great benefits to our members. So I would say the number one reason that you should join CARP if you haven't already done so is to support our advocacy, and we need your support. But I also like to say our members do good and do well. So for example, anybody that wears glasses, we have $150 off at our partner at Iris for all CARP members. If anybody uses medical marijuana or has been thinking about doing that, we have a $50 discount at CanMed. And if anybody needs health insurance or dental insurance, we have an insurance partner that's able to offer very competitive rates because CARP members are very trustworthy. So that's our benefits, and then finally our community. And we have, I'm delighted to tell you, just reformed our Vancouver chapter of CARP. And one of the things I'm going to be doing while I'm here in Vancouver is creating some CARP chapters, for example, on Vancouver Island, on the Sunshine Coast, and in the interior, to really elevate our voice. So that is who we are. My boss, Moses, likes to talk about the ABCs of CARP, and it is, of course, our advocacy, benefits, and community. On your tables, you'll see a copy of our benefits booklet if you want to take a look at some of the other benefits we have. And some of our advocacy literature, as well as Zoomer magazine. Together, we can do what we cannot do alone. And certainly, it's not enough just to become a CARP member, but it is a critical step forward. And so, I will end this part of my presentation with a pitch to please join. I've put out memberships on all your tables, and I finagled a special event pricing. So for $50 for a 5-year membership, or for $15 for a 1-year. The forms are on your table. Those are today's pricing. And if you aren't sure if you are a current member, you know what? If you are a current member, we'll just add this on to your term. So there's no reason not to do this. And if you aren't able to do it today, I do have some other forms you can take away, or you can sign up online, but they have higher prices. So I'm going to stop there and take questions.
And I'm happy to come with the mic so that we can all hear your questions.
I have a question for you.
Please.
We're in a country called Canada, which is probably one of the most divisive nations that we have in the world. Did you ever think about seeing Canada as one, united, where everybody can say something and be heard, and forget about the provincial and territorial divisions that we have in this country? It's ridiculous. For example, on health care, why don't we have a national health care standard in this country? Why don't we have a whole bunch of other national standards that can't be overtaken by a provincial or territorial government to just block us? It's ridiculous, because it seems to me that the way we ask for things in this country is a divisive thing in itself. We have to have something that's uniting us rather than dividing us.
Thank you.
And it's all of our different governments that divide us.
If you talk about what makes us Canadian and what we're most proud of as Canadians, some people might talk about the fact that we're often sorry, or that we have a great healthcare system. But I think one of the things that is particularly unique to Canada is our federal provincial jurisdictions and the bickering that can result about whether something is federal or provincial. And certainly, one of the things that I would say is incredibly wasteful is when we recreate something 13 different times so that each province and territory has their own version of it. And whether it's how we write an advanced care plan, or how we regulate and what forms somebody fills out to sell stocks and bonds. So I'm with you there. I think we have an opportunity with pharmacare. There's a potential to take something right now that is diverse, where each province covers different groups of people to different extents. And BC has some of the lowest coverage for older adults compared to the rest of Canada. I think there is for us to set a standard that is equal right across the country. I know that our members are very supportive of that. I think 87% believe that coverage for older Canadians should be consistent right across the country. And it may be that if we can be successful there, that will be a pilot that will encourage other areas of success for unification. So
Well, whatever you said is extremely interesting. If you remember correctly, you were a guest speaker at the board meeting of the Jewish Seniors Alliance about 6 months ago. And as a result of your presence there, we've approached the CARP organization in Toronto. And we had a very interesting discussion for about 6 months, well, probably about an hour and a half. And what we said at that particular time, that you have the right idea, but the wrong approach. Let me explain. You see, you have a membership of 300,000 across the country. You really don't know through the membership across the country what is happening in each province. We are a small organization, fairly new one. We started in 2003. I started it in 2003. We know what's happening here. We have a representative of Costco here that has close to 100,000 members, and probably wrong figures, because I think that they represent more than 185,000 members across the province. Why am I referring to those numbers? Because what I suggested to CARP at that time was not a membership drive, which would get somewhere, and not really what we want. Not really what we want. A partnership. We are present here. We can feed you.
let me respond. Thank you very much. So two great points. One is, it's all well and good for you to want members, but we've got some other membership organizations out there. Why not work with them to move our message forward? Completely agree. I just had a chance to reconnect with Barb from Costco and delighted to work together. Ken has mentioned an interest in pharmacare, which is something that's of great importance to our members. What we typically do when we make a submission to government, when we have a campaign, whether it's a petition or write your member of parliament or call your MLA, is we look for other partners to stand with us. And we're thrilled to have Jewish Seniors Alliance as one of those partners. In terms of your second question about let's focus on prevention rather than just looking after people once they become sick. And certainly one of the things that a pharmacare program can do is make sure people can afford their drugs so they don't end up in hospital. But I think it's beyond that. And one of our priorities for this past year, and will certainly continue into the future, stems from that exact idea. Where Moses Neimer, my boss, said to me, Wanda, you and certainly your predecessors have always gone out and asked for things. You said, we want funding for this and a policy for that and a program for that. And it's time for us to take some responsibility for ourselves. And so we've kicked off something called the Stand Up Straight campaign. Where, yes, and it's the idea that we want to get out and get moving and get active, because if exercise was something that you can bottle and sell, it would be a bestseller. The health benefits are indisputable. So we want to work on that and absolutely to take responsibility and to encourage the government to fund not just the results of what happens if we don't look after ourselves, but to help with some preventative measures as well. Okay.
Next. I have a question and a request.
Please.
The question is, you had said earlier in the presentation that we need to spend more money in healthcare, or you said earlier. The question is the hospital care system, healthcare, underfunded, or are the funds misdirected? That's the question. The request is, you had written a number of items that CARP had lobbied for in Ottawa and were successful at. Could you share that with us, please?
Absolutely. I have a slide. Here's a few of our wins. These are some of the recent ones. Reduced drug costs in Nova Scotia and Ontario. An extra $1,000 a year for low-income seniors. A rollback of the OAS age of eligibility from 67 to 65. And a $6 billion commitment over 10 years for home care. Going back further, I think our initial biggest win was getting rid of the mandatory retirement age. And we have had a number of things that we've done in the meantime. Right now, we have some ongoing campaigns. We've talked about those, protecting pensioners, fighting for investors' rights, looking for more funding for caregivers, more support for caregivers. Those are just a couple of the things that are on the agenda. Do I think that more dollars are needed for healthcare? I think the folks that I've talked to within the healthcare system, many of them have said it's not about more spending, but about better spending. And for example, we spend a lot of money to keep people in hospitals because there isn't available what are called alternative levels of care beds. So rather than keeping somebody in a long-term care facility at, say, $250 a day, or at home with support at maybe $125 a day, or keeping them in a hospital bed at $1,000, or even in an acute care bed at $10,000 a day. So there's definitely ways that we could do things better. There's always challenges. It's much easier. One of the rules of thumb in systems, if you're in a business and you're building a computer system, is if you have to change something by more than 20%, you're better off to scrap it and start over. Unfortunately, we can't just scrap our healthcare system and start over. But what we can do is look at what's been successful in pilot projects, not only in Canada but around the world, and some really innovative programs. One of the things that so often happens to older adults in hospitals is that they become deconditioned, and so they go from living in their own home and having a trip or a fall or a flu or something, and end up not being able to go back to where they were. But there are some programs that deal with it differently, that take older adults and treat their physical conditioning as a really high priority and have them up and walking and being toileted and staying physically fit so that when they recover from the illness, they're able to go back and home. Imagine if every hospital treated every patient as that holistically. So I think there's some really wonderful things that can be done. So here and then.
Thank you, Wanda. I applaud you. Your presentation was wonderful. Talking about the home care, Isabel McKenzie, our BC Seniors Advocate, says 15% in residential care would do well with home care with proper funding for the needs that they have. And so she's just released her newest report called Transportation on home care and more services. But what we try to do, working together, working stronger, we are all better off for working for our senior longevity and good health by being together. So I applaud what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb, and right back at you, and really excited to get together and talk about how we can partner more. And on the subject of long-term care, let's just talk about that, because I think that's an area where there is rampant ageism. And it starts off in the nicest way. I was in Italy, and the reason I went was to participate in a World Incontinence Conference. And it was about both urinary and fecal incontinence, which are one of the reasons why many people say that they have quality of life or no quality of life. And I heard from nurses who work with long-term care facilities who talk about the normalization of incontinence, how when individuals are admitted into long-term care, they get a little pad that says, it's important for you to feel dry. So what we do is we give everyone pads, and that is the thin edge of the wedge, because soon somebody is sitting in a diaper and being changed not as often as they need, but as a stretch staff can allow. And it doesn't have to be that way. There are others at the conference who talked about best practices where there is enough staffing so that people can go to the washroom on a regular basis, be toileted. Not when, one of the things that happens when we're old, just like when we're young, we often don't have control. So there's very little time between the urgency of needing to urinate or to have a bowel movement and the actual act. But preventative measures work. If we just regularly go to the washroom every 4 hours, then that urgent situation is avoided. So it's a question of putting staff and a priority in place, and I think it's a critical thing that we must do.
Here, question. Yeah, I'll come around. My name is Dolores Luber. I'm the editor of Senior Law Magazine, which most of you know here quite well. Thank you, Wanda, for your presentation and your increasing cooperation with Senior Line, in that we do publish your posters and do get permission to publish from time to time some of their articles, which are very useful. My question is, I'm interested in medical assisted dying, and I'd like to know if CARP is continuing to fight for increased eligibility. My major concern is if I'm diagnosed with Alzheimer's tomorrow, I would like to be able to plan my future. However, at the moment, you can only be of sound mind in order to participate in the Death with Dignity program. Are you proceeding with this?
Thank you for the question. is something that's near and dear to my heart. And when I came to CARP, I was concerned about whether I would be able to continue the advocacy that I'd done at Dying with Dignity. And as much as it was fantastic that Canada had allowed for assisted dying, legislation has fallen short of the court decision. The court decision for allowing assisted dying is that individuals must have a grievous and irredeemable condition and suffering. Yet the legislation put an additional proviso on that individuals must be near death. The court considered the issues of assisted dying for children, for individuals with mental health issues, and for people who were not competent, as through an advance directive, but didn't rule on that. That has meant that many older Canadians find themselves in a catch-22. If you have a dementia diagnosis, you could still be years or decades away from imminent death. So you don't qualify for medical aid in dying. Yet, when death is closer and you do qualify, you are no longer competent to make that decision. So what's a person to do? Now, we've polled our members on this issue, and 9 in 10 support medical assistance in dying through advance directive. And can I just ask for a straw poll around the room, how many of you here believe that you should be able to use an advance directive to request an assisted death? Okay. So maybe not quite 9 in 10, but a fairly significant majority. CARP is firmly on the record of supporting that, and we will continue to support not just medically assisted dying, but high-quality deaths, high-quality palliative care, proper use of palliative sedation, so that everybody should be able to die on their own terms with peace and dignity.
So, Wanda, I have a suggestion and a question. First suggestion is, you said words matter, and we use the term retired. Now, for the general public, the word retired has a very derogatory meaning. It means, oh, you just do whatever you want. So the term that many organizations use is rewired. And rewired means you are now doing the things you dreamt of doing years ago, and now you have the time to do it. For example, one of the things I do is I like to volunteer. I like to do advocacy work. So when somebody says, are you retired? I emphasize, no, I'm rewired. So can you possibly think of that? My question is, under the Canada Health Act, health has to be uniform. And it so happens that many of the new technology in health is available in certain wealthy provinces, like Ontario, some in British Columbia, but are not available in poorer provinces. How can we solve that?
So two great thoughts there. One of the reasons that we are now CARP is to get away from that word retired. And my boss, if asked what CARP stands for, will say it's the Canadian Association of Rejuvenated, Recreated Individuals. I really like rewired as well. We've struggled with the idea of rebranding it for a different name just because of the recognition, the name recognition that CARP has, but it's a great thought, and I love rewired. Your second thought about healthcare and raising the standard right across the country, critical. Yeah, absolutely critical. And I don't know what the solution is for that, but I think we need to recognize that right now there are disparities and we need to work towards addressing them. Yes, and is this the last question, or are we just about out of time?
Are there others? We have a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 more people.
Thank you so much for all your great work. And number 2, I would be interested in hearing more information about the new and improved Vancouver chapter, please.
Oh, perfect. Yes. So the Vancouver chapter has just been. We had a Vancouver chapter that wasn't able to put on some programs. We've now got a new executive committee that's formed, and they're very committed and excited about putting some things together. If you're interested in volunteering or just getting involved in attending some of their programs, that would be fantastic. As a CARP member, we use your postal code to assign you to a chapter. So if you're in the Vancouver area, you would automatically get information from the CARP Vancouver chapter, unless you opted not to receive chapter information. But if you'd like to get potentially involved as a volunteer, let's talk about that afterwards, and I'll happily connect you. The other thing I will say is, for those of you who are currently filling out your membership forms, and there's some more on the back tables if you need another one, I have deliberately brought the forms from our Vancouver chapter, which means that 40% of everything we collect today will go to that chapter to help them with their funding. So if you needed one final reason to sign yourself or someone you love up, that hopefully is it.
Yes. Yes. I'm aware of the fact that there is improved health in connectedness. And connectedness means that a person who is unable or finds it difficult to get to public transportation then is confined to one's home. Now, I know that there are some communities in Vancouver that have been able to make some connection with TransLink to get shuttle buses in their community. I'm not talking about the Handygard. Handygard is very good and helps everyone who needs that particular help, but it has its drawbacks also. But a shuttle bus in the community will allow people to get to the main arteries of public transportation, which will allow them to get to places where they can connect with other people, which will keep their health up or improve their health, and there'll be a reduction on the cost of medical attention. And I am really, one of the main reasons I can come today is to put this forward, because I think it is so important to have transportation for we people who find it difficult to walk to the main bus links, and because I know I would leave my car in the garage and take buses, and but I know other people would too. So I really hope that this is a main course that could be followed up. Thank you.
And may I ask, do you live in the Vancouver area?
Yes, I do.
So one of the things that we do at CARP is we have such a challenge between an ocean of need and a sort of a stream of resources. And one of the risks that we take is a lack of focus. If we try to address too many things, we'll end up achieving nothing. So when we look at our advocacy priorities, we pick 5 a year, and we poll our members, we talk to our volunteers, we look at the landscape, and we say, what are the things that need to be done? But we recognize that 5 national priorities doesn't begin to touch on the local and regional issues that are so critical to our members. And that's why the tools that we use nationally, the petitions, the tools to call an MP, to email an MP, the policy research, we make that available to our chapters to help them take on local advocacy issues. And so whether that is large print books in the library or parking at the hospital that's subsidized for people that have to repeatedly go and can't afford to go. And certainly a shuttle bus initiative would be a great local advocacy priority. So if that's something that you're interested in, then I'd love to connect you with our Vancouver chapter.
About a year and a half ago, we managed to reach the Ministry of Health federally. And we had a meeting with them. It was always financial. And you know, it's a very interesting thing that we responded at the time. The surge, really, we like to do very much something for you. But I want to tell you one thing. We give the money to the provincial government to look after the health issues for the province. We have no input or any way that we can change the situation. And this refers to the importance of the partnership within the area of provinces with CARP that would lend itself to the support and the knowledge of the provincial governments when it comes to health care and, of course, the attentive situation with the seniors. Thank you.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I have to respond to the lady at the back there who talked about needing shuttle buses. I walk with a walker. I have MS, and I also find it hard to get around, although my red scooter is fabulous. But I want to tell you about Jewish Seniors Alliance, because we are the organization in the Lower Mainland Vancouver area on behalf of all wonderful older people who advocate to the provincial government and local governments on your behalf. So yes, we think CARP is wonderful, and yes, we're thrilled that you're working on a national level. On a local level, come to Jewish Seniors Alliance. Call our office, call our leadership, come to our meetings. I'm the nomination committee. You want to be on the board? Let me know. Oh, great. Okay. I see Ezra Levant from our local federation. He will work with us to make sure that the community, not just the Jewish community, but the entire community, the Jewish Seniors Alliance is your address for local advocacy, and we will work and support the work of CARP also.
Did we leave anybody out? I'm sorry. Well, oh, sorry, Ezra. Yes, run.
I just want to, I'm Ezra Shank, and I'm the head of the Jewish Federation. You might have noticed that the chairwoman of our board, Karen James, shifted out as I shifted in because we're splitting duty between here and Festival Harikud that's going on at the JCC. But I wanted to come by. I brought my mother with me, who's with me. She's an angel. This is my Mother's Day bonus. This is my Mother's Day gift to my mother as she's following me around as I go around the community. I just want to say one quick thing, and I think it's important for me to say something to the effect of thank you. The work that JSA has been doing, and all of you have taken the time on a beautiful Sunday afternoon to come together and have this important conversation is why we're supporting these types of programs and why JSA is so important in bringing you together. You know, it starts with a sense of conversation. It turns from conversation to action. And I think that the fact that you're in the room right now is a step in the right direction for continuing to improve what it is that our government is doing to support our treasures. I call it our treasures, you know, with my mother in the room, our treasures of our community and how important it is. And I do want to thank Ken and the whole committee that put this on, and I want to thank you for coming into town and being with us and talking about how CARP is putting words into action on behalf of this really, really important population. So I want to thank each and every one of you for spending time with us.
One day you spoke with us about elevating our voice. So I feel that I am speaking on behalf of everybody here in elevating our voice to thank you. You spoke about the importance of facts, and I took careful notes because so much that I learned this afternoon was new information and powerful information. 1,000 Canadians turn 65 every day. Centenarians are our fastest growing demographic, and 6 million Canadians are 65 plus. So I'm just going to commit that very much to memory. The other portions that I loved about your time with us is that you focused on the current and also on the future, and were very solutions oriented in the work that you and CARP are doing. Another fact that I never knew was the word GOMER, get out of my emergency room. Was I the only one to learn and to know about that? And then your focus on stories and how much they matter. And I once went to a presentation by a SFU prof who said that we always think about stories for young children. We don't necessarily think how important they are for adult learning. And the fact of the matter is that people actually remember the stories more than the facts, which I had to write down. So in so many ways, we listened, we've learned, you've heard the strong advocacy voices in our audience. And when I went to bed last night, I thought, I am going to give you our gift card and say, thank you, wonderful WM. That would be wondrous mentor and mentor. Thank you.